If you take the Titanic, double its width, and nearly match its length, you begin to understand the scale of the MV Derbyshire. She wasn't just a ship, she was a floating steel island, a fortress built to shrug off the most violent oceans on Earth. Yet on September 9th, 1980, this 170,000-ton Leviathan didn't just sink. She was erased. There was no distress call, no debris field, no survivors. In the span of a single radio silence, 44 people and a vessel the size of a skyscraper simply ceased to exist. For 20 years, the maritime world told us this was an act of God, a force majeure, where a monster storm simply overwhelmed a good ship. But that was a lie. The truth lay 4 kilometers down, hidden in the pitch black of the Pacific floor. And when the truth finally surfaced, it didn't just solve a mystery, it revealed a terrifying chain reaction that could happen to almost any ship at any time without anyone on the bridge knowing until it was too late. This is the story of the sinking that shouldn't have happened. To understand why the Derbyshire vanished, we have to understand the arrogance of her era. Built in 1976, she was an OBO carrier, oil, bulk ore. She was the pinnacle of British engineering, part of the bridge-class fleet. These were the workhorses of the global economy, designed to maximize profit by never sailing empty. Oil one way, iron ore the return. When Captain Geoffrey Underhill steered the Derbyshire toward Japan in the late summer of 1980, he was commanding a state-of-the-art machine. He was a veteran mariner. He knew the Pacific. And when reports of Typhoon Orchid came in, he wasn't panicked. He did exactly what the manuals dictated. He hove to. He slowed the ship down and angled the bow into the swell to ride out the storm. It should have been a rough night followed by breakfast in calm waters. Instead, the Derbyshire went dark. When a ship this size disappears, the immediate assumption is that she capsized or broke in two. But for 6 days, nobody even admitted she was missing. When the search finally launched, it found nothing. The ocean is vast, and the Derbyshire was just gone. The British government's formal investigation was quick and dismissive. They concluded that the Derbyshire was caught in the worst part of the typhoon, and nature simply won. Case closed. But for the families of the 44 deceased, the act of God verdict didn't make sense. Ships of this size do not just succumb to waves. Smaller, older vessels had sailed through Typhoon Orchid and survived. Why did the newest, strongest giant fail? The families, led by the father of a lost engineer, began their own investigation. They didn't have government funding, but they had something better, a pattern. 18 months after the Derbyshire vanished, her sister ship, the Tyne Bridge, encountered rough weather in the North Sea. The crew heard a deafening crack. When they inspected the deck, the steel had split open. The ship was barely held together. Then, in 1986, another sister ship, the Kowloon Bridge, ran aground off the coast of Ireland. She didn't just get stuck, she snapped in half like a twig. The evidence was mounting. The bridge-class ships seemed to have a fatal genetic defect. The families identified a specific structural point, frame 65. It appeared that the shipyard, in an attempt to cut costs and compete with Asian shipbuilders, had terminated crucial longitudinal steel beams too abruptly. This created a massive stress point right in front of the accommodation block. The theory was compelling. The Derbyshire had hit a massive rogue wave. The hull snapped at frame 65 and the ship split in two, sinking instantly. That explained the lack of a distress call. It explained the Kowloon Bridge. It explained everything. For years, the families fought for a new inquiry based on this frame 65 theory. The government resisted, claiming it was too expensive to find a wreck in deep water. But the pressure became overwhelming. Finally, in the 1990s, an expedition was launched to the bottom of the Pacific. They expected to find the Derbyshire broken in 2 clean pieces, confirming the structural flaw. What they found instead shocked the entire maritime world. The wreck was not in 2 pieces. It was shattered. The Derbyshire looked like it had been put through a blender. Thousands of pieces of twisted steel were scattered across the ocean floor. But as the forensic analysts began to map the wreckage, something strange emerged. The stern, the back of the ship where the crew lived, was largely intact. The bow was decimated. But crucially, the area around frame 65, the supposed fatal flaw, didn't show the signs of being the primary point of failure. The ship hadn't snapped in half because of a bad weld. The structural defect theory, the theory the families had pinned their hopes on for 2 decades, was wrong. So if the ship didn't snap and the captain didn't make a mistake. What killed the Derbyshire? The forensic team had to look closer. They had to look at the smallest, most insignificant details of the wreckage. They turned their attention to the bow, the very front of the ship. And there, amidst the mangled steel, they found the smoking gun. It wasn't a crack, it wasn't a bomb. It was a series of small open holes. On the foredeck of the Derbyshire, there were ventilation pipes, mushroom-shaped steel vents designed to let air into the ballast tanks below. These vents had heavy lids that could be screwed shut. But during the storm, the waves crashing over the bow were not just water, they were green water. There is a difference between white water, the frothy spray you see in movies, and green water. Green water is a solid wall of ocean, weighing tons, moving at speed. The investigation revealed that for hours, the Derbyshire was plowing into these massive waves. The green water sheared the lids off the ventilation pipes. They were small openings, only about a foot wide. To the crew on the bridge, hundreds of meters away, and blinded by rain, this damage was invisible, but it was lethal. Over the course of the storm, thousands of tons of water poured through those open vents into the forward ballast tanks. Slowly, imperceptibly, the bow of the ship began to get heavier. As the bow grew heavier, it rode lower in the water. Because it rode lower, the waves hit it with even more violence. It was a vicious cycle. The ship was slowly nosediving, and the sensors on the bridge gave no warning. The ship's engines were pushing her forward, driving the weighted bow deeper into the angry sea. And then came the moment of total failure. The Derbyshire had 9 massive cargo holds. Covering these holds were hatch covers, steel plates the size of a tennis court. They are designed to be watertight, but they are not designed to be submerged. As the bow sank lower from the water entering the vents, the first massive hatch cover, hatch number 1, was no longer fighting spray. It was fighting the full crushing weight of the Pacific Ocean. The steel groaned, bowed, and then collapsed. In a split second, the number 1 hold, an empty cavernous space filled with thousands of tons of water, the weight was instantaneous. The ship pitched violently forward. This triggered a domino effect of apocalyptic proportions. As the ship lurched down, the next hatch cover, number 2, was smashed by the ocean. It collapsed. Then number 3. The ship didn't sink. It was driven under. We can now reconstruct the final moments of the 44 souls on board. It is a terrifying sequence. Captain Underhill and his crew likely felt a sudden, violent change in the ship's motion. The bow didn't rise out of the next trough. It kept going down. Within seconds, the ship was tilting at a catastrophic angle. As the water rushed into the massive holds, the air inside was compressed with explosive force. This explains why the wreck was found in thousands of pieces. The ship didn't just break up, she exploded from the inside out as the air pressure blew the steel plating apart while she plummeted to the bottom. The entire event, from the collapse of the first hatch to the ship disappearing beneath the surface, likely took less than 2 minutes. There was no time for a radio call, no time to launch a lifeboat, no time to say goodbye. 1 minute, they were fighting a storm. The next, they were falling into the abyss. The tragedy of the Derbyshire wasn't a structural crack or a bad captain. It was a failure of imagination. The designers simply never believed that small ventilation pipes could sink a Titan. They never calculated that a series of small failures could cascade into total destruction. The discovery of the true cause cleared the crew's names. It proved Captain Underhill had done nothing wrong. It proved the ship wasn't weak, but she was vulnerable in a way no one had anticipated. Because of the Derbyshire investigation, maritime laws changed. Ventilation pipes on ships were redesigned and reinforced. Hatch cover strength requirements were increased. Electronic sensors were installed on bows to detect flooding. The 44 people who died on September 9th, 1980 did not die in vain. Their tragedy forced the industry to open its eyes to the dangers of green water and the domino effect. Today, thousands of bulk carriers traverse the oceans, carrying the raw materials that build our world. They sail through typhoons and hurricanes, battered by the same waves that claim the Derbyshire. But they float, and their crews return home because of the lessons learned in the silence of that dark September night. The ocean is unforgiving of small mistakes. The Derbyshire taught us that even the biggest fortress is only as strong as its smallest vent. If you want to support more high-quality documentaries like this and ensure these stories aren't forgotten, please hit the like button and subscribe. It really helps the channel. Let me know in the comments, what other maritime mysteries should we investigate next?